The furnace heats the body to somewhere around 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 980 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, organic molecules cannot survive. They don't just get warm, they break. The thermal energy, the sheer vibration of the atoms at that temperature is enough to snap chemical bonds apart. Think about what heat actually is at the atomic level. Temperature is just a measure of how fast the atoms and molecules are jiggling. At room temperature, the molecules in your body are vibrating gently, stretching and bending, but the vibrations aren't violent enough to break the bonds holding them together. At 980 degrees Celsius, those vibrations become savage. The atoms are thrashing around so wildly that the bonds simply can't hold. Proteins unravel and shatter. Long fatty acid chains crack into fragments. DNA, that elegant double helix, falls to pieces. Sugars fragment. Every complex molecule in the body is torn down into simpler pieces. This first stage is called pyrolysis, the thermal decomposition of organic material. Pyrolysis, fire, lysis, breaking apart. But that's only the first act, because the furnace is full of air, and air is 21% oxygen gas, and those molecular fragments, those newly exposed carbon atoms and hydrogen atoms, are suddenly surrounded by eager oxygen molecules. And carbon has an enormous affinity for oxygen. Hydrogen does too. So what happens is immediate and fierce. The carbon atoms grab onto oxygen atoms and form carbon dioxide. 2 oxygens for every carbon, locked into a tight, stable, linear molecule. The hydrogen atoms grab onto oxygen atoms and form water, H2O, which at these temperatures is superheated steam. These are combustion reactions, and they are wildly exothermic, meaning they release energy, a lot of energy. Why? Because the bonds in carbon dioxide and water are much stronger, much more stable than the bonds in fats and proteins. In chemistry, we measure bond strength in terms of how much energy you'd need to pull the bond apart. The double bond between carbon and oxygen in carbon dioxide is ferociously strong. So when atoms rearrange from their old, relatively weak configuration into these new, more stable molecules, there's leftover energy. The atoms have settled into a lower energy state, and the difference comes flooding out as heat, as light, as infrared radiation pouring off the furnace walls, as convection currents of scorching air. The furnace doesn't supply the energy for cremation. The body does. The furnace just provides the activation energy, the initial kick to get things started. After that, the reactions sustain themselves because they're releasing far more energy than they require. This is what fire is. Every fire, from a match to a forest blaze to a cremation furnace, it's atoms finding more stable partners and dumping the energy difference into the environment. Fire is atoms relaxing. In the cremation furnace, this happens on the scale of an entire human body. The carbon that was in your muscles, your skin, your organs, your brain, every gram of it, combines with oxygen and floats away as carbon dioxide gas, up the chimney, into the atmosphere. The hydrogen that was in your water, in your fats, in every organic molecule, combines with oxygen and leaves as water vapor. Steam, also up the chimney, into the air. The nitrogen, which was in your amino acids and DNA, mostly gets released as nitrogen gas, N2, which is already 78% of the atmosphere anyway. It just rejoins the air like a drop of water returning to the ocean. It's just small amounts of sulfur leave as sulfur dioxide. Trace minerals vaporize or oxidize. So let's do the accounting. That 145 pounds I asked about, it left as gas. Carbon dioxide, water vapor, nitrogen gas, and small amounts of other trace gases. It's all still there. Every atom. Not a single one was destroyed. They just changed partners. The carbon that used to be bonded to hydrogen in a fat molecule is now bonded to oxygen in a carbon dioxide molecule, drifting through the atmosphere. The hydrogen that used to be part of a protein is now part of a water molecule in a cloud somewhere. The nitrogen that spelled out your genetic code is now just part of the air someone else is breathing. And that box of ash, what's actually in it? Almost entirely calcium phosphate, the mineral component of bone. Hydroxyapatite is the technical name. It's a crystal, a mineral lattice of calcium, phosphorus, and oxygen. And it has an extremely high melting point, well over 1500 degrees Celsius. The cremation furnace, for all its fury, isn't quite hot enough to volatilize it. So the calcium and the phosphorus stay behind, along with tiny amounts of other minerals. Sodium, potassium, bit of magnesium, traces of iron and zinc, that powdery substance people keep in urns, what we call ashes. It's essentially ground up bone mineral. Everything else, every soft tissue, every organic molecule, every drop of water left the building as gas. And if we're being precise about energy, the chemical energy stored in a human body's organic molecules is roughly equivalent to about 110,000 kilocalories. That's enough energy to power a 100-watt light bulb for roughly 50 days. During cremation, nearly all of that stored chemical energy gets released as heat and radiated away. The furnace gets very hot, the flue gases carry thermal energy up the chimney, and eventually all of it dissipates into the environment. The energy doesn't vanish any more than the atoms do. It just spreads out, degrades into diffuse warmth, following the second law of thermodynamics toward ever greater entropy. The atoms are conserved, the energy is conserved. But the organization, the structure, the intricate arrangement, that's what's lost. And this is a deep point. The atoms in a living body and the atoms in the gases leaving the chimney are the same atoms. The total energy is the same. What's different is the arrangement. In the living body, those atoms were organized into fantastically specific structures. Proteins folded into exact shapes, DNA encoding billions of base pairs in precise sequences, cell membranes maintaining delicate chemical gradients. That organization represents low entropy, a state that's extraordinarily unlikely to arise by chance. Cremation doesn't reduce the number of atoms or the amount of energy. It increases the entropy. It takes a highly ordered arrangement and scatters it into a disordered one. And the second law of thermodynamics tells us that this direction, from order to disorder, from concentrated structure to diffuse simplicity, is the direction the universe overwhelmingly favors. You can unscramble an egg in principle. Nothing in the laws of physics forbids it. But the number of ways the atoms can be arranged in a scattered state vastly outnumbers the arrangements that constitute an intact egg. The universe doesn't conspire against order. It just has an awful lot more room for disorder. I want you to sit with the atomic picture for a moment, because it means something specific. The vast majority of what made up a human being, physically, is now distributed through the atmosphere, mixed into the air, and within days or weeks, those carbon dioxide molecules scatter across a wide area. Wind patterns carry them. Within months, they've spread across the hemisphere. Within a year or two, some have circled the entire planet. Some of that carbon dioxide will be absorbed by a tree, pulled in through the stomata of a leaf and used in photosynthesis to build new sugars, new cellulose, new wood. Some of that water vapor will fall as rain into a river, flow to the ocean, get drunk by a fish, evaporate back into a cloud. The atoms go on. They keep participating. They have no memory of where they've been, no loyalty to the pattern they were part of. They just follow the chemistry wherever it leads. This is not poetry. I want to be very precise about this. This is atomic bookkeeping.